Hello everyone, I'm Kana Taku. I've been fortunate to conduct a series of cross-cultural studies on post-traumatic growth, or PTG, by collaborating with scholars around the world. Because different regions have their own challenges in regard to natural disasters, war-torn borders, crime rates, and climate-based spread of disease, where we live will impact what traumas we may experience. In order for us to study both the universality and the cross-cultural differences of PTG experience around the world, researchers must acknowledge and account for the impact of the various beliefs, values, educational and economic levels, and most importantly, languages of their participants. Ideally, each of these categories must be equivalent in order to compare apples versus oranges, but it is impossible to reach a complete equivalence within these categories, so we can at least aim for equivalence in parts, such as standardizing the language being used. It is common practice for scientists to use a standardized set of items, that is, scales or inventories, with participants to gauge their experiences in a systematic and structured way, which ensures that all participants have received the same instructions and guidance. Therefore, any differences in responses reflect individual differences instead of outside contamination from unwitting nuances in how the questions are posed. In other words, the items have to measure what they are supposed to measure regardless of language. The term for this is validity. This validity gives us the confidence that we can compare responses that learn more about the universality and culture-specific characteristics with regards to the psychosocial reactions after trauma around the world. However, when we need to make these set of items available to speakers of various languages, a new stumbling block occurs. The finer points of language used in the inventories have the potential to become corrupted through the translation process. What we have carefully measured in the original language for validity may not automatically maintain that same validity in the target language once we translate. One of the ways that we attempt to mitigate these changes is by not only having several professionals translate materials from the source language to the target language, but then an additional group of translators work to put the translated text back into the original language. This process is called back translation, started back in 1970, and is a vital aspect of ensuring linguistic equivalence across inventories. For example, one item on the PTG inventory reads, "I have a greater feeling of self-reliance," which we translated into Japanese as 自らを信頼する気持ちが強まった. Then, professional translators worked from the Japanese back to English without seeing the original English source, of course, as "I have more self-confidence." And as you can see, the two English versions are very close to one another, with some slight differences from the translation process. This is how we can potentially verify the accuracy of translations. But how do we know the Japanese sentence has the same connotations and implications as it did in English? As a matter of fact, Dr. Robin Nabi and his colleagues pointed out that Chinese back translation of the term, for example, disgust, did not really capture the same connotation of the English term disgust. And some of the Chinese words that are supposed to mean disgusting were more like the English terms anger, hate, or frustration. I was chatting with my research assistant the other day, and she said one of the items that measure post-traumatic depreciation, "I discovered that I'm weaker than I thought I was," sounds very negative because of the word weak. But when I read the Japanese translated version, 思っていた以上に自分は弱い人間であることを発見した. Even though if I back translated the Japanese into English, it would be exactly "I discovered that I'm weaker than I thought I was." This Japanese version doesn't sound negative at all, because maybe perhaps discovered anything, whether it's strong or weak, implies self-realization. So subtle variations and culture-specific nuances would be sacrificed in order to strive for accurate back translation if we need to achieve linguistic equivalences. The items are often less descriptive than they could be in either language to make them more similar across each language. I have to say that the functional equivalency of the translation is maintained at the expense of the richness of their either language. I still think back translations are currently the best solution that we have at hand if we want to do international research. But I'm aware that there are other researchers who is summarizing empirical evidence against back translation to make a stronger suggestion. Quote, BT should be entirely abandoned as a method of translation quality evaluation, and propose an alternative functionalist approach. By the way, it may be interesting if I back translate my YouTube video scripts because I always make them in both English and Japanese without necessarily translating one from the other. Well, thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the thumbs up. Thanks.